It is a thrill for me to launch this new year and the 5th season of the Fore Golfers Network with a conversation featuring two of the most talented golf course architects that I've ever had the privilege of meeting over the years. And both of them, as we speak, are probably 2 or 3 miles away from each other, being nice and safely distanced. But Tom Doak and Mike DeVries have a long history together and a long history in the business. And so, guys, I don't know how long it's appropriate to say Happy New Year, but Happy New Year. It's good to see both of you.
Thanks, Bill. Nice to see you.
Happy New Year, Bill. Appreciate it.
Yeah, what is the cutoff date? Does anybody know?
It's the first time we talk to you, so this counts.
This is it. We're done. Okay. Normally, we would save it all for the PGA show in Orlando, but since that's not going on, we'll just take care of it all right now. Here we are now in the dead of winter. It's January. We start to build up golf fever a little bit from the consumer standpoint. And meanwhile, I don't get the feeling that you guys have a lot of downtime. Mike, what is January, February like in the world of a golf course architect?
Well, for me, typically, I'm home more, kind of as we would say, if you want to say the off season. So the winter, the holidays, you kind of get, from a business standpoint, you're trying to figure out the year end, get the stuff off to the account and all that kind of junk that you don't want to deal with. And but you're always planning. You're still trying to get stuff ready for the coming year, whatever projects those are. If you're fortunate and you're working down south or in the southern hemisphere somewhere, you may have projects that you're actively visiting and going to. So, and obviously with the COVID, that's a bit different and stranger and stuff like that. So that, the new normal, who knows what that means anyway. So, but for me, typically I'm home a bit more, less travel for the next couple of months, which is kind of nice, sort of a little reprieve and get to catch up on reading and research and stuff like that.
Meanwhile, Tom in his office, I think, is just going to spend a lot of time opening boxes of books. He's just got books everywhere over there. Tom, what's wintertime like in your world?
It's shipping books.
Yeah, that's what you want to do.
I'm a publisher now in my spare time, so I've got, we typically are sending 50 books a week out the door or something like that. Oh, thanks, Mike. I didn't do that.
It's a little plug. Here's a plug. This is part of my winter reading.
That's the last and biggest book. But, I'm still trying to finish the confidential guide. I've got 1 volume to go. And unfortunately, it's about courses in Europe, and I can't go travel there right now and see the courses I want to see to finish them. But Mike described the life cycle of golf course architect pretty well. I mean, the off season, we're kind of down. I was reading something about baseball the other day, and there was a great quote from Roger Hornsby, the old Hall of Famer. They asked him what he did in the off season, and he said he stared out the window and waited for spring.
Just like the rest of us. Just like all of us. By the way, you'll notice that of the 3 of us involved in this Zoom call, one of us doesn't have that book that Mike just held up. That hurts. That cuts deep since a major holiday just passed. What in the world?
It's a very expensive book. I did not give away too many of them.
Well, you guys have your fingerprints in great golf destinations around the country and in other parts of the world, and certainly here in our home state of Michigan. And Tom, I would love to hear from you, and then from you, Mike, as to how it all got started. How did you ever have your interest piqued in this side of the game in design?
Well, for me, it started when I was a kid. I think I got exposed to good golf courses really early. My parents barely played, but one of the first courses I saw was Harbor Town at Hilton Head when it was brand new and we were on a family vacation. And it was a big deal at the time. And one of the things they had was it was a forerunner of a yardage book. Nobody played by yardages in 1970, but they had just a diagram of every hole and 2 or 3 sentences about how to play it. It was written by Charles Price, the golf writer who had a winter home down there. And he'd spent a lot of time with Mr. Dye when he built it. And it was just the perfect primer on, what golf course architecture was about. Second hole, it's a short par 5. there's only one fairway bunker on the left, but you want to drive it over there so you can get past the trees short and right of the green if you want to try to attack the green in two. Simple enough that a 10-year-old could read it and think, yeah, there's something to that. And then I was just, as little as my dad played, he used to go on one golf convention trip every year, and they played it at places like Pinehurst and Pebble Beach. So I saw all those places when I was a kid, and they were just so much better than the little public course that I grew up next to in Stamford, Connecticut. I got interested in design.
How about you, Mike?
Well, similarly to Tom, I started playing the game early, and my grandfather taught me the game. And I was fortunate. I went up to Frankfurt area in the summers where my grandparents were, and so I learned the game from him. And I would dawdle about after them, and play. I'd chip and putt when they were playing, and then I played a little public golf course, the Frankfurt Golf Club, which is an old 9-hole course. It's no longer there. And there you'd get hooked up with whoever was playing. So I got introduced to the game early, and then, really was attracted to it. And it was a thing that I did with my grandparents and my uncle who played, who was a really good player. And that led me into working in the pro shop for Fred Muller over at Crystal Downs. And I was in the bag room, getting carts, bags, whatever, picking the range, doing all that stuff. And then I started working on the grounds crew and did that throughout high school and college. And after I had graduated from college, I did something else and got, figured out that their mission in life and mine weren't really in the same direction, and came back up, got married up in Frankfurt, and went and worked back at the golf course. And that's when Tom was building High Point, his first design. And my old boss from the Downs, Tom Mead, was running the project for Tom. He was the project manager. And I had met Tom, and I was talking to Fred one day, and I said, wow, this is what I keep going back to this. What he's like, well, you need to go over and meet Tom Doak. He's working with Mead on that project over there. So I came over and spent the day with Tom, and we went off camping for our honeymoon, and then came back, and that's how Tom and I met. And then I worked with Tom for about 2.5, 3 years, kind of at the end of High Point, just getting it ready, and then down in Myrtle Beach and up at the Black Forest. And so that's sort of I got interested in the game, but Tom really gave me my start as far as real design and construction and learning about the business that way.
So Tom,
long time ago.
Well, it seems like yesterday, right? Tom, when that first assignment comes your way, High Point, and it's the first time that you really have full reign. It's your own baby, and you're the man whose name is on the masthead, so to speak. Is that first experience as nerve-wracking as the first tee shot at a major would be? Or I can remember back to my first time in broadcasting when I was actually going live to do something, and you have these butterflies. Was it like that for your first golf course?
No, I think it's exciting more than anything. And of course, a golf course construction project is not, it's stretched out over a very long timeline. So the odd part about it is you never, you don't get that instant gratification. You keep building the golf course, and it keeps looking better and getting better, hopefully. And then you're done, but it takes a lot time longer for it to grow in and be ready to open. And, nowadays, by the time the golf course is ready to open and everybody wants me to interview about it, I'm on to something else. And, it's almost hard to be excited about the thing you did last year or the year before. It's not exciting. It's very exciting to get out and finally play the thing once you get a chance. That's probably the best day of all, the first day you get to go play the golf course and see if it works the way you wanted it to.
I can remember hearing from, I can't remember which actor it was, but it was on a late night show, and they were there to promote a movie, but the movie had been shot 2 years prior.
Sure. Yeah.
And at some point, the host, it might have been Conan, asked the actor about a specific scene. And he got this blank look on his face. He's like, to be honest with you, I don't remember. It was a couple of years ago. So we know that golfers are a little bit different in this regard, because we have this uncanny ability to maintain useless, trivial knowledge about our own games where, I can take you back to the last time I played X course on the 13th hole and why I took a 7, and we have this recall. Do you guys, Mike, do you guys both have hole by hole or project by project recall from a couple decades ago, or is it all a blur?
It's yes and no. I think you do have, particularly when you're ensconced in a project and you're really going through it. There's a lot of days that are very similar, and you're kind of plodding along, and you're getting a lot done, but it doesn't seem like you're making a lot of progress, when actually you probably are. You're putting things in the ground that people don't see. And then there are certain days, like the first day that you like seed a fairway or something. That's always like a pretty memorable day, because hey, we're putting grass down, or something like that. So there's sort of like days where you take baby steps, and then occasionally there's this giant leap that you make, and it's like it's not really that much different, but it kind of does give you a bit of satisfaction and excitement, that hey, we're actually moving ahead in the schedule. But I think that's there are a lot of things that there's certain things that maybe you remember about certain holes. Each one's your own little baby in this way or that way, and but it varies. It depends on the things, and we're getting older, right? And you lose detail here and there too, after 20 or 30 years.
I'll vouch for that. I used to be famous for having a photographic memory of everything I'd ever seen, and you just keep seeing more and more, and your own projects you remember in more and more detail. So that kind of forces out what the 12th hole on some course you haven't seen in 20 years looks like.
Well, the hard drive can get full. At some point, the hard drive gets full. Right?
You would think, but it's amazing. Like the book that Mike just held up, I did a book about routing golf courses using my own projects as case studies. So I'm going back to projects, High Point, and things I did 20 and 30 years ago. And I was amazed how well I remembered certain things, and like what the inspiration was for that hole or the other hole. Like the second green at High Point had a 3-tiered green, and that was, we built it in the summer of 1987, and the US Open was the Olympic club that summer, and they had a little short par 4 there with a 3-tiered green. And I went out and built that like the next week.
How different is the routing of a golf course if it's going to be a walking only course versus one that needs to accommodate carts and cart paths? I've always wondered about both the aesthetic side of that and the strategic side of how you wind things through there.
Well, I think I speak for Mike too, that, routing a golf course so you can walk it is really important. I mean, if you still to this day, if you look at the lists of the top 100 courses and what everybody thinks are the best courses, they're all really walkable. I mean, there's not an exception on that list. So the golf business has all been about, oh, nobody walks anymore. We don't need that. Everybody has a golf cart. But practically speaking, if you're trying to build something special, you want people to be able to walk it. And the strange thing is, so I've built like a half a dozen courses at least now that are walking only, plus a couple overseas where golf carts just aren't a thing so much. And it's funny sometimes that I go back and look at, where you get a green like and a tee for the next hole, like really close together. And then you go look at it later and you think, man, if I had to put a cart path in here, it would be hard. There's just no space. It wouldn't be as seamless as it is when I don't have to worry about that. There was one hole at Pacific Dunes that if we'd had to put a cart path somewhere, I think it would have wrecked the look of the place. It's the 11th right down there by the ocean. It's the most photographed hole on the golf course, and getting, the cart path would have been right in view because there's a cliff, there's a golf hole, and there's a big dune on the inside of it. There's no good place for a golf cart path to go. So thank God I didn't have to build one there.
Yeah, and is that a point of contention that can come into play between ownership and architect? Mike, have you found yourself at times pleading, please don't make me put a cart path in this spot, kind of a discussion? I'm wondering how those, I know the guy who writes the checks generally gets his or her way.
Sure.
But the artist can fight back every once in a while, right?
Yeah, well, you have to find them. You have to find the median. And Tom's totally correct. I mean, a golf course, just the cadence of the golf, it was developed, walking and everybody going to their own ball and hitting it, moving it, and carts have become this thing that are, we're going to make money with the carts. It's a bottom line issue and things. No one ever talks about how much it costs. On top of that, they just look at the income side of golf carts. We're gonna lease carts and we're gonna make this amount of money, but no one talks about the extra stuff that you have to go to, like maintaining the golf course. Do you need to irrigate or fertilize more because you need more endurance because carts are going over it? There's enough damage just from like maintenance crews and their carts and what they do, and then when you on top of that a bunch of golfers and they all have to go to notwithstanding the cost of the cart paths, but the carts all go to a certain area and then people walk on and they concentrate flow there. Whereas if everybody walks to the front of the hole and goes over, they fix their ball mark, they put their bag down, they putt, and then they all walk off probably in another direction, or there's a wider spread. It's not all angled right to where the carts are designated to park. So it does become, it's a challenge sometimes, and most places are going to have golf carts, particularly in the US. So you have to figure out a way to make that work and make them not too visual. And sometimes that's not easy to do.
I'm thinking, Tom, about the loop, at Forest Dunes, which of course was created as a walking only course, and then market forces and consumer demand comes into play.
Actually, it wasn't. We didn't start it as a walking only golf course. When Lou Thompson came to, when we talked through the concept and he went for it, I didn't even think I would try to sell him on a walking golf course because I didn't think that Lou was the kind of guy that was going to walk and play very much on his own. So while we're building it, he goes to Pacific Dunes and he comes back and he calls me and he says, I really loved walking the golf course. It's the first time I've ever walked 18 holes. I think we should make our course walking only too. And I was like, who am I talking to here? You kidnapped Lou. But I was so, in one way it was music to my ears, but on the other hand, I was kind of skeptical of it because to be a walking only course, you have to have a good caddy program. There's a lot of people that would like to walk and play. There's not a lot of people that want to carry their own bag.
Right.
And that, if Forest Dunes were like right in Grayling next to the high school, that would probably work. But 20 minutes down the road, it's just hard to do, because you don't know how many people are going to want to take a caddy unless you require everybody to, and nobody really wants to go that far. And then, so you don't, you want all these people to show up for work without knowing if they're going to have work. It's really hard to run a caddy program. That's why you don't see very many of them.
I can't tell you, Tom, how many conversations I've had with people from our audience who've asked me about the loop, and they're going to go play one. They're going to go play. They're going to play the loop, and they're going to play the Dunes course. And I have so often cautioned them to not render a judgment on the loop until they've played it both directions. That's kind of the beauty and the magic of it. Is that good advice that I'm giving out?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for anybody to do it that way. Their natural reaction is going to want to be to judge it on the basis of the first thing they see. That's how, it's very hard to even get these guys that rate all the best courses in the world to stay and see a golf course twice. They're just down the road to the next place the next day. And so first impressions matter a ton in this business. And to build a golf course that you're only seeing half of it on any given day is a weird thing. And it's kind of hard to get people used to that idea. But certainly, to me, what's important about getting them to play it twice is if they're playing it one direction and trying to figure out what it's like going the other direction, they just totally, they don't remember what they just saw because they were too busy trying to figure out how it was going to work the other way around. And it's too complicated to really do that very well.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go back out the next morning, the reactions from most people are just total shock and surprise how different it looks and feels. Because the backgrounds for the holes are all different. You know, you're playing to the same green you saw yesterday, but you're not looking at it from the same place. It's possible you'll wind up in the same place around the green and have the same chip shot you had the day before, but not likely. Usually you're just seeing it. It really taught me a lot about how much the background of the hole matters to people. You know, that they just, that's a big part of their impression of the golf hole. And when you take that away and show it to them from a different angle, they just don't even know what it is.
I think it's fascinating. I absolutely love it. I did lose a battle there last summer with the biting gnats, and I needed a blood transfusion. But that's has nothing to do with the design. That's to do with with the region. I have pictures. My legs look like I was in Saving Private Ryan, and thankfully I've recovered, as you can tell. And I just love the course. And I took a friend there who had never played there before, and the feedback was just spectacular. And it is. It's wonderful. And as part of that entire experience at Forest Dunes, Lou Thompson, the name that you mentioned before, and I think a lot of golfers have come to know of his vision and his investment in bringing back to life a property that was doomed. I remember being at Forest Dunes on a July Friday afternoon before doing the radio show Saturday morning and seeing 2 cars in the parking lot and wondering if they were open. And that's kind of where it was. And thankfully now it is a national destination. It is incredible. The short course is open. Of course, the Loop is a huge draw, and the original Dunes course by Tom Weiskopf is really, really good. And that's why I was a little bit surprised here in the last couple of, I guess a few weeks ago, to learn of the sale that Lou was going to turn it over to, I think, the same group that has Stream Song, where Tom, you've done just an awesome course down there. Were you surprised at hearing about the sale of Forest Dunes?
I was surprised. We had I have an annual golf tournament called the Renaissance Cup that I invite other architects and past clients and everybody to. We had it over there the year after the Loop opened. And one of the people that came and played was Rich Mack, who was my client go-to guy at StreamSong. And he stayed at Lou's house that week, and they got to know each other pretty well. So I think they've been talking about this for 3 or 4 years now. And, Rich was a vice president of Mosaic, and it was really his idea to do the project at StreamSong. But he doesn't work for Mosaic anymore. So he's not, he went, when he left Mosaic, he left the golf business, and he really liked the golf business. So that's the impetus for him buying. I thought maybe he'd wind up being a partner in it instead of actually buying the place outright. But it sounds like he and a couple other partners are buying it outright.
Well, and we'll move on to other subjects here, but I just want to say this, that as hard as it is to think of Forest Dunes before Lou Thompson came,
yeah,
also difficult to think about Forest Dunes after Lou Thompson departs, because he has done just a tremendous job of resurrecting that entire property. So I'm thankful that we in Michigan got to meet that man from Arkansas, and here's hoping that the property continues to thrive moving forward. And I know that the Loop will be a key part of that.
Well, all I can say is I think it's in good hands. But they're not. Rich Mack's from Minnesota, so he understands the golf season up here. Yeah. But it's a different market for them. Yeah. We'll see how they do with it.
For sure. Mike, sorry to leave you out for a little while there.
It's fine.
Last summer, you and I got to take part in a really kind of a cool thing, which was the production of a TV show called the DeVries Golf Trail. And for our podcast and video audience right now, you understand that in that show, we did 4 golf courses and then an extra full show featuring the Kingsley Club, which is the first time we've ever put a private golf course on our television program. And it's weird, Mike, because I was talking earlier with another guest about the impact of Jerry Matthews and the Matthews family throughout the state of Michigan and the golf scene. And then I start doing some figuring. I'm a little slow, but I get there eventually. I start doing some figuring that Mike DeVries' fingerprints are in an awful lot of this state's golf scene as well. So as we go from, in my mind's eye, as we go from the Grand Rapids area all the way up to Gray Walls and Marquette, and we make a stop in Kingsley at the Kingsley Club, what is it about this trail of yours that, I don't know, makes you the most proud?
Well, the sites are all different, and the golf is very, very good in all the different places. So, I mean, that's really fun. It's nice to, Tom knows we travel a lot for our business, and that's not always the greatest, getting in an airplane a lot, even though we're not maybe doing it right now. That's a challenge, and you're away from family, and so when you have a project that's close to home, that's always really, really welcome, because you can drive there, you can get home, you can have sort of a normal life when you're doing stuff, and fit things in. So that's been, I've been very fortunate with that. And having grown up in the Grand Rapids area, I've got a lot of friends down there and stuff that, are still there. And so when I have the chance to get back down and, we can go out and play golf, it's fun to go play one of the courses I was involved with. And then, it's always nice to check up with them and see how things are going. So that's a big plus for me.
I always wonder if, from a architect standpoint, if the opportunity to play with dynamite is an extra thrill. And I think I asked that because when you're up at Gray Walls and Marquette, there's some considerable rock moving that has to take place. And I seem to recall some descriptions of some explosions taking place during the construction phase up there. So do you get an extra, pun intended, do you get an extra charge out of being able to watch things go boom?
Yeah, it's I've always liked fireworks on the 4th of July. But we did surprisingly little blasting at Gray Walls. There were just 4 blasts, 2 of them really, really small. The one in the middle of the 7th fairway was actually probably that, and the 5th fairway, those were a little bit larger. But not anything like the first stuff. Back in the mid 90s, I was working for Tom Fazio, and we were on a project out in New York called Hudson National, which is up on the Hudson River in this escarpment. They did blasting on every golf hole there, at least somewhat. They blasted on every hole. And the first blast I saw was over 900 drill holes. So this whole hillside just like heaved. And I'm like, is this what it's always like? It was that was impressive. And so all the other ones since then have seemed kind of tame. But it's a challenge. It's Gray Walls, we're very fortunate because we have this very diverse site, and the rock is there, and we're able to use that as a feature, as a backdrop, as a hazard in places where there's a rock outcropping in the middle of fairways. But then there's great soil there too. There's really, really good sand. So there could be a rock outcropping and we go over 40 feet and, it's pure sand. So it's very fortunate from the standpoint of, turf grass and being able to do that. And they get a lot of play. So, you need good soil there.
It's an awesome golf course. And
Thank you.
When the show aired, we got so many comments from people who said, I guess I better include the UP on my plans for next season. And
Sure.
Our point is, yeah, you really should. You're missing some wonderful golf up there. I'm also reminded that within our own state, whether it's what you described in the Marquette area and even up into Houghton, where mining is still a part of the economy, or you go over to Forest Dunes, Tom, where there's sand everywhere, and over to Pilgrim's Run, Mike, where near Grand Rapids, where you had this northern Michigan-like terrain in there. Our state kind of has a little bit of everything except for palm trees. I mean, this is a really diverse state from kind of a geographical sense, isn't it, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, Lost Dunes down in the corner there was all sand dunes next to Lake Michigan, and but had been excavated as a sand quarry. So a little of both elements that you're talking about. But yes, it's a tremendously diverse state. it would be the golf capital of the world if the season was a little longer.
That's really a good way to put it. A couple questions for you that are sort of current golf topical questions, and you guys deal with this all the time. Distance. Do you believe the ball is traveling too far and that golf courses must be designed or amended to compensate for that? Or are we worrying a little too much about the top 0.5% of this game, like the DeChambeaus, who are always going to be the longest players out there? Mike, I'll start with you.
Well, distance is an issue, I think, because there's this transition now where the better players used to hit the ball so far, and really good amateurs were maybe a little bit behind them, but there wasn't the extreme difference that we see now. And the thing is, what I'm seeing is that the professionals and those young guys that are playing college golf, good, they're good amateurs and stuff. Everybody has all this technology that they use, whether it's TrackMan, swing monitors, things like that. They've got all these high-tech, carbon fiber shafts and stuff, and big heads that, balloon on a stick is what I want to call it. But they're able to utilize all of that and maximize what they're doing. So their error of, differential or whatever is really, really small, and the average player is still all over the place, where he might connect sometimes, but he can't do it consistently. So it's really difficult to say, hey, we're going to design for them. I haven't seen the Memorial Park that Tom did down at in Houston, where they held the event, so I'll be to see what he says about it. I think from my perspective, I'm trying to look at how do we create good, fun, interesting golf that everybody can play. If you're specifically doing a tournament course, I think there's a lot of things you take into account for that. I haven't done that. So I think I'm trying to find variety, and if a guy hits it 340 yards, he hits it 340 yards, and he's probably things he's got to worry about. So it's difficult though, because then we're getting into old golf courses. You go and do renovation, and what happens with that is that there's not any room to expand. And how do we accommodate that, or should we accommodate that?
Tom, how do you handle the issue of distance in your work?
Well, I think you said in the beginning, I sort of lean toward the side of we worry about it too much because it's not that big a percentage of golfers, and mostly they don't come to your golf course and they don't pay when they do. That when Mr. Hayden at High Point said, what if we had a tournament here? I'd been around Pete Dye and the PGA Tour just enough to be able to laugh at him and say, well, unless you got $5 million burning a hole in your pocket to have a tournament, you're not having one, so don't worry about that. Build this golf course for people that are actually going to come pay to play it. And for the first 20 years of my career, I didn't really have to worry about building a golf course for tour players at all. I just worried about building courses that were fun for people. And most people, 99% of people, can't drive at 300 yards. So I didn't worry too much about that. Now I do a lot of consulting for older golf courses, and you go to San Francisco Golf Club and they say, well, Adam Scott was here last week and, hit driver 8-iron on the longest hole of the golf course. What should we do? And I just look at him and go, has your handicap gone down a lot? Or are we just talking about a guy who plays here once every decade? So talking people down is a big part. I think the fact that, the tour has a huge impact on the golf business because it's on TV and everybody sees it and everybody thinks they've got to react to that. But most golf courses would be far better off remembering that they're not on tour. Now I'm at the point in my career where I do occasionally get a call from somebody who wants to host a tournament and they have $5 million burning a hole in their pocket and they can do it. The Renaissance Club in Scotland, which hosts the Scottish Open now, is one of those. And Memorial Park in Houston was a municipal golf course downtown that the owner of the Houston Astros didn't want to see Shell dropped out as sponsor of the Houston Open, and they were ready to lose the tournament entirely. And the owner of the Astros went to the tour and said, look, I can get enough money together to keep the tournament here. It's not all going to be out of my pocket, but, every other company is in the same position as Shell. They can't afford to spend $8 million a year sponsoring a tournament and then have a downturn and be laying off people and people pointing at them saying, how can you sponsor that tournament when you're laying off people? But he said, but there's plenty of businesses in this city that want to see this tournament stay here, and I'll get them together. But we want to have the tournament downtown where people will come. So we're also going to raise money to redo the municipal golf course. And just, they raised $10 or $15 million to rebuild the municipal course and then hand it back to the city when they were done. It's quite a project. And, we got it all done in less than a year so that they could have the tournament. It had to be done a year before the first tournament. So we had to get it done by October, November of 2019 to play the tournament on it this past fall, which they did. And it was really fun to watch. I've always just not really cared so much about the tournament scene and what tour players thought of my courses, honestly, because I'm not building for them primarily. But, for this project, I had Brooks Koepka as a consultant a little bit. And he was fun to listen to, and, he has some different perspective on things, but it really changed some of what I did. I didn't build nearly as many bunkers as I would normally, because he's like, if I'm in a fairway bunker, it's better than being in the rough. And if I'm in a greenside bunker, I'm trying to hole it. So, that's not the first thing that's going to really make me nervous. But it was neat to see a bunch of the best players in the world play it. They played the first tournament the week before the Masters, so a bunch of good players showed up this year. And the golf course kind of held its own. And the one really interesting thing was, you hear all the time now, and Koepka was famous for saying, it doesn't matter if I hit the ball in the fairway or the rough. If I hit it far enough down there and I'm hitting wedge to the green, it doesn't matter. But in Houston with that Bermuda rough, it did matter. A lot of those players came and told me, it's the first time in a long time, if I get up to the ball and it's in the rough, I have to be really defensive on the second shot and think, where am I going to try to leave this around the green? Because it can get away from you. They couldn't stop it where they wanted to. That's the pros' big advantage. They can make the ball stop right where they want most of the time. And that Bermuda rough is just tangly enough that it's not predictable.
I'm thinking back, Tom, I remember now watching the tournament and hearing the broadcast team refer to Koepka almost as the co-designer. I mean, it was like he got so much praise for it. I thought maybe you ought to split the check with him. And then I started to think to myself, hey, hang on a minute. Now, the Koepka that I've observed for a lot of years is see ball, hit ball, win money. I've never really thought to myself, now this guy's got the eye and the mind of an architect. So what was the interplay like between the two of you, and did he actually pay attention?
Well, he didn't have I don't know what he got. He's friends with the client. I don't know what he got paid to consult on it. I don't think a lot. And so I knew he wasn't going to be around a lot while we were building it. He's got a very busy life too. But we talked a lot in the beginning about what I was trying to do, and, how can we make this different, and what are the players going to like and not like? Like one of the first things he said was, I tell you what, we'll be absolute heroes if you just don't make every par 3 over 200 yards. We're so sick of seeing that, and all the really cool par 3s are short ones that you can get in real trouble if you mess up. I'd love to see more holes like that. So he kind of helped talk me down from thinking that I had to build a super long golf course, which was really good. And then, beyond that, he only had time to come out once during construction when we were about halfway through and it had a lot of the greens shaped, and he could make some comments on some of those, and we redid a couple of things that way. But I'll tell you what, he was beyond good at he went out of his way to answer questions about the golf course and do PR, and personally, he was always deflecting it. No, it's not my golf course. Tom built the golf course. You know, I just gave him a few pointers, and he was really nice about it. And it's really fun to see a guy that good go out there and try to hit the shots that he's been talking about for 2 years, because he can hit them where he wants to when he's on. And he was really dialed in for that event.
Oh, that's very
He
cool.
cares about, you know, that impression that he doesn't think much. He tries to keep it simple, but he cares about architecture. He's, you know, the reason he's better at major championships is because those are the golf courses where it matters where you hit it. And he thinks about it. And I'll tell you what, I think he thinks that's an advantage for him, that there, you know, a lot of courses they play week to week on the tour, you don't really have to change what you're doing from one day to the next. It's like, just hit it over there 4 days in a row and you'll be okay. And on a great golf course, that's not true. But there's a lot of guys that just, they're not used to changing their minds all the time. He really thinks that through.
Mike, one of the things Tom mentioned was the benefits of a short par 3, where everybody has a chance to get to the green, but if you miss the green, you've got some issues to deal with. And it brought me instantly in my mind to number 9 at the Kingsley Club, which, boy, that thing can yield anything from, I guess, an ace. I didn't make one, but to an 8 or a 9 if you get it in the wrong spot. Can you speak to the benefits of a shorter hole still being filled with plenty of challenge?
Yeah, I think, you know, the thing that when Tom was talking about that, the thing that I started thinking about was like Pebble, the 7th hole at Pebble Beach, which is a little over 100 yards, but you know, they've got and the wind starts kicking up, it moves the ball, you know, they're getting it in the air. So anybody that can hit like a knockdown shot and is more comfortable with, you know, adjusting to things like that, actually making shots, and then instead of just saying, hey, it's yardage X and that's why I hit this club. So in a lot of ways, I'm, you know, seeing those shorter par 3s, because the average guy, you know, if you 70 yard, 180 yard par 3, you know, which I would call sort of a medium par 3, that's long for a lot of people. And so that's really difficult for them. They can't, you know, they're hitting a higher club in there, and, you know, the ball isn't going to stop as much. It's not going to have as much spin on it. So, and then when you look at the 9th at Kingsley, and it's a small target and it's severe on the sides. But, you know, if you play, what I always tell people when they're, you know, they haven't been there or whatever, I say, you know, hey, if you're going to err, you know, err on the inside low where you can hit up, then you can hit your recovery shot up and you can use the slope to stop the ball. And, you know, you can make 4 that way. You know, you might not make 3, but you're going to, if you really attack it, you can get yourself in a bad position where the ball is going to run away and then you have another tricky shot. So, and that's, you know, that being a private club is a, you know, it's a very, and it's interesting, you know, hearing Tom say, you know, what Brooks had said, and that's why I immediately thought of Pebble and how they have to sort of deal with different shots there. And they're sometimes they're hitting long irons if it's really blowing. But, you know, that's unusual. It's still pretty much a short iron club.
All right, one more question for the two of you. You guys have been very, very kind with your time. I know that you're both frequently asked about your favorite course that you've designed. I'm not going to ask you that. What I'm going to ask you, Tom, is which of Mike's courses, if you could play one round, which of his courses would you play first?
Well, Diamond Springs, because I haven't seen it. So yeah, I've seen all of his other work. I've not seen that. I'm not exactly sure where it is, but it can't be that far from home.
I found it. It took a while, but I found it.
You know, they actually called me about that job before they talked to Mike years ago, but the superintendent who was putting it together was so vague about, so would you help with, I can't remember whether they wanted me to help with the routing and not with building greens or the other way around or something, but it just sounded strange. And I was like, I couldn't figure it out. So I passed. And, you know, it sounds like it was a great project for Mike.
It's a really good
you know, I get to play Kingsley every once in a while, and I like that a lot. That, you know, I've only played gray walls once. I'll probably go back again. One of my daughters actually lives up in the UP. She went to school in Houghton, so we drive through Marquette once or twice a year to go visit. And I'll probably stop through and play that again next year. But I do need to see Diamond Springs.
Mike, same question to you. Tom, one of Tom's courses that you would play if you had one round to play.
Yeah, there's a lot of good ones, and there's a bunch that I haven't seen. I've never been to Cape Kidnappers. That's just hasn't been on the itinerary. So I'd really like to see that one of these days because it's really good. And I actually haven't played Old McDonald because it was in construction the last time I was at Bandon. So that would be, that would be really fun. Was Tom? He mentioned the Renaissance Cup before, and when he had that down at the Legends Complex down in Myrtle Beach, neither of us had been there in about 10 years since we had built it, and we both got done, and we were finished with the first time we played it, and a long time, and we kind of both looked at each other and said, "Wow, it's a lot better than I remember," because the superintendent had it set up really well, and it's cool being able to share those things, or going to somebody's golf course and talking to them about it afterwards, and what were you doing, what were you trying to do here and there, because these projects, they take a long time, and there's a lot of things that the raters that go through and, well, that was a horrible hole, but they don't have any idea why you got to that sort of position. So it's always interesting to, what were the complications that you had, whether it was a soils issue or drainage. Right, exactly. So so I think that's really cool. I think I think Cape Kidnappers and Old McDonald will be at the top of the list for me for Tom's, because I just haven't been to them yet.
Kidnappers is where?
New Zealand.
New Zealand.
Island of New Zealand. One of my homes away from home. I actually have a golf trail, but it's in Australia and New Zealand.
Hey, we'll go do it. It's gonna be
I'll tell you what, there's 5 golf courses, gonna be 6, and they're all some of my best work. I mean, the only reason to fly that far is to do something that's crazy good.
That is a
I've had a few
miserably long
chances,
flight.
and Mike's had one too.
Yeah. Hey guys, thank you for helping us kind of shake off winter for a few minutes and think about warm thoughts in golf. And thanks for all the work that you do for the golf world in our state and across the nation and across the world. So I admire the work that both of you do. Love playing your courses and love helping spread the word about them. So much appreciated. And for the last time in 2021, Happy New Year.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Tom. Happy New Year.